Top of the morning, peoples. It is Monday, January 8th, and I am here with your geopolitical news. Al Jazeera reports Palestinian girl loses her sight and her family in Gaza attack. Do you know where my mom and dad are? An 11-year-old girl who loses her sight in an Israeli attack in Gaza was in a hospital asking for her parents' whereabouts, unaware that they have been killed. As you guys know, I'm always gonna play something to give you guys a little bit of context as to what it is that I'm speaking about.
شوية شوية أغير لك المسطرة. شوف حبيبتي سامعاني؟
So now, this is a little girl who was attacked in an Israeli airstrike, right? So now she's already in the hospital. She's blind. And from the looks of things, she's suffered more injuries than just losing her eyesight. But as she is in the hospital, she asks for her parents. As any child, little boy, little girl, as anyone would, she asks for her parents, only to be informed, only to find out that her parents have also been killed in an entirely separate attack.
إيش؟ تعرفي ولا أبوي وأبوي؟ خليش يكونوا ميتين. وأنا بنزل والأرض تتكسر وأنا أنزل على الأرض بعدين بعمل هيك وهيك لقيت في جنبي أحجار اضطريت أساعد لسه طولي ما حدش ساعدني بعدين بالعافية عبال ما واحد مسعف أجا شاف.
To see images like this, as I said before, it has to be heartbreaking. And I don't care where you are in the world, whether you have children or you don't have children. If you are connected to the human race, then it does not matter. It does not matter. As I sit here before you and, you know, I'm in what I call Street Icon Studios and I'm reporting these events, I ask myself, would it matter to you what race these children were? And I know for an absolute fact that it would not matter. It would not matter what race these children were. I would not care. I would still feel the same way. I would still feel the same hurt, the same outrage, the same stress, the same. It's like sometimes I wonder how much does one expect those of us in society to take, to witness without action?
وين الوجع؟ رجلي وداني وعيني. اليسرى فاقدة يعني الإصابة حرجة جدا جدا جدا، لا يوجد أمل إنها ترى بعد ذلك بالعين اليسرى ولا حتى اليمنى، لكن نحن سنحاول يعني تغريز العين اليمنى، لكن الإصابة في كلتا العينين إصابة حرجة وهي لن ترى.
You know, I know some of these images are a lot for you guys to bear. But you see, this is what I feel is the problem with the Western news media outlets. You can't say, as an American citizen, that you want to be privy to all information. You want to be told the truth, but yet you don't want to see the totality of what's actually happening. You know, if you're one of those people who become, you know, squeamish or a certain way when you see these images, I totally get that. I am totally understanding to that. But as a human race and as individuals who who absolutely need to receive and assess information, we all have to bring ourselves to a point where we allow ourselves to be receptive to even the things that are most grotesque to us, the things that we do not want to see, the things that we don't wish to see. It's an illusion, and it's also a disservice to yourself.
الولاد الصغار كانوا عايزين سيلفي. سيلفي استشهدت في الاعتصام. سيلفي استشهد أشلاء. البنت الصبية أشلاء. أختهم أشلاء. ما فيش معالم إنهم، مش معالم إنهم. إحنا لا إلنا في سياسة، لا إلنا في حماس، لا إلنا في ولا إلنا في أي شيء. مدنيين من الشمال جايين هنا. هاي حالة حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل.
It's a very heartbreaking thing to see. And I know many of you are unprivy to things like this that are happening in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. In other geopolitical news, Al Jazeera reports Putin is starting 2024 from a position of strength. The political, military, and economic collapse of Russia, many in the West had hoped for, never materialized. Russian President Vladimir Putin entered 2024 with the confidence of a man who is sensing that he might be gaining the upper hand in a wrestling match against a far superior rival. Just a few weeks earlier, he had announced his intention to run for re-election during a ceremony awarding medals to Russian veterans of the war in Ukraine. The conflict has featured prominently in his election campaign, reflecting his apparent belief that its outcome will be in his favor. If you've been listening to me cover this topic, then you probably already know how I feel about this situation. I feel like Vladimir Putin I feel like Russia, you know, they're not only winning the war, and I have to give Russia and Vladimir Putin, President Vladimir Putin, some credit for showing restraint because they could have won the war a long time ago. I think all of us who understand weaponry, who understand military power, who understand the major players in the world as we know it, I think we all can attest to the fact that Russia could have they could have been won the war. But you see, in order to have done it that way, they would have been doing something very grotesque, very inappropriate, something that would have been highly frowned upon on the world stage. And even what they're doing now is frowned upon on the world stage, right? But you see, the way they're strategically moving into Ukraine, it speaks volumes about the restraint that Russia has because they could have used certain weaponry to get an advantage inside this situation, but they haven't. And so if you are a person of intellect, if you are a thinking individual, then it should lead you to the question of why did they begin this conflict to begin with in the first place? What was the motivation to begin such a conflict in the first place? Why did it happen? Because once you begin to peel back the layers of that question right there, then you will begin to have some sense of understanding about why Russia is moving in such a fashion. Now, would many would say Russia's invaded Ukraine and Russia's bullying Ukraine and you know all of these different things that would be said about what Russia's doing. Once again, I have my own opinion. I believe that Russia is defending itself. The same as if the United States got word or caught wind that Russia was moving into Mexico, hypothetically. So I believe it's the same thing. I believe it's no different. And I don't, for 1 second, believe that America would allow such a thing. Like I absolutely, as I sit here, I absolutely do not believe that America will allow such a thing. They would take such a thing as an act of war. If Russia decided to move into Canada, it would be taken as an act of war. And so the fact that Ukraine was, you know, negotiating or trying to broker a situation where they could, eventually become part of NATO, I can only imagine that this is just not only blasphemous, but it's appalling to even speak of in Russia. And so I've never felt from the beginning of this conflict that in any way, shape, form, or fashion that Russia was in the wrong. I've never felt that way. And so when I hear about what's going on with the economy of Russia after all the sanctions that was placed on it by the United States of America, and as a result, the United States of America's allies have to fall in line, and so they also have to, you know, they have to abide by the sanctions. But somehow, some way, Russia has figured out a way around these sanctions. So much so that now the economy is turning to a positive. It's something to be said about that. That's a clear definition of resilience. If ever a nation as a collective could show resilience in any way, shape, form, or fashion, this is resilience. And so, what do I think? Ultimately, I think that not only will Russia be victorious in the conflict with Ukraine, but I even believe that Ukraine will ultimately have to give up more than it ever foreseen that it would. In other geopolitical news, I'm on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. The Young Turks, I suggest if you're into media content that is very unbiased and leans more on the side of just reporting the news and just putting stories out there. You understand? You receive information, you see it, and you report it. That's it. Unbiased, not sifting through it, not picking and choosing which stories you think will make the best headlines and all of this, that, and the third. The Young Turks Post coming up on Undisputable. Teen mom killed by stray bullet on first night out after giving birth. So I guess this story was first reported by the New York Post. Now, I am not a follower of the New York Post. I do not read the New York Post. I do not receive information from the New York Post. I do not digest information from the New York Post. But that does not mean that stories or information that's posted or given by the New York Post does not have some form of accuracy. You see, the problem with this, in my stance on things like this, and I'm not moving away from the topic at hand, which is, this young teen mom being, killed by a stray bullet, which is very, very unfortunate. But as it relates to the news, I identify with news media platforms that are unbiased. And traditionally, in the United States of America, what you have gotten from your major news media outlets is a very biased take on things. And so I don't even know if it wasn't for an outlet like the Young Turks that I would even be privy to this information. Now there are other platforms, which is the platform that I'm on, which is the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. So, the Young Turks is a platform, as well as, they have a page and a site on the X platform, which is another platform. And there are many platforms, but there are few in the vast majority as it relates to the vast majority. So I don't know if you guys are privy to this, but this is something that you might want to follow up on, and stay tuned to my channel because I do updates. In other geopolitical news, Al Jazeera reports North Korea fires artillery towards South Islands, prompting evacuations. South Korea condemns move as act of provocation that escalates tension and threatens peace on the Korean peninsula. North Korea has fired more than 200 rounds of artillery shells into the sea near a tense maritime border and towards two South Korean islands, which Seoul called an act of provocation as it responded with live fire drills. So, what do I think about this, right? Well, since the beginning of these conflicts, and there's been many different conflicts to cover, but I've been tracking since, you know, what we now call Genocide Joe. I've been tracking his presidency. And ever since he's became president of the United States of America, there's just been conflict after conflict after conflict. And almost strategically. And it's a continuation, but almost as if it's happening strategically as it relates to the American government and the American military industrial complex's response. It's almost happening strategically. So here's what I mean. There's a conflict that happens, United States of America responds. Another conflict happens, United States of America responds. And they're responding with not only humanitarian aid, but they're responding with military aid. And so the question is being asked all over social media, all over the internet. How many conflicts can the United States of America involve itself and engage in? And then, very well, at the same time, defend itself to the maximum capacity, to the fullest extent. How is this possible? If you have soldiers over here, you're deploying troops here, you're deploying, machinery and equipment here, you're deploying troops there, you're deploying, how will you be able to defend your own homeland? And so I believe that outside of just the fact that some of these countries have been being run by racist, colonialist regimes, and the fact that there's just civil unrest. Outside of that fact, what you have is certain adversarial countries that are strategically picking a time to engage in a conflict with America. I believe that it's all strategic. And so this conflict that's happening and unfolding, I believe, is the same thing. It's North Korea, for whatever reason, feeling threatened by the appearance, by, you know, the relationship that South Korea has with the West. And all you find is, I can only imagine that the North Koreans, all they keep looking up and seeing is another, you know, American or, another US base being built in South Korean land, which is an obvious threat to the national security of the North Korean people. And so, when you are covering these stories, it is important that you try to put yourself in the place of the people where the conflict is happening. You know, the true essence of being unbiased is to never choose a side. Information is information. So when you receive the information about a conflict, there should be no intent to choose a side in the conflict because of what you know historically or what you think historically of said people. And so, you know, my opinion about this situation is my opinion about many nations and many countries around the world. If you can say in the same breath that because of the situations that had the tragedy that happened on October 7th, if you can say that Israel has a right to defend itself, well, you can say that any nation in any country in the world has a right to defend itself. And you can only condemn said nation as Israel is to be condemned for the way that they choose to reach a resolve. It's the X platform, formerly known as Twitter. Street Icon at Street Icon 1 on the X platform. That's at Street Icon 1 on the X platform. You can come here and find links to all of the videos and all of the content. And then you can shoot over to YouTube and watch everything in its entirety. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about these stories that I've just informed you on. How does this make you feel? Did you know about these stories? Drop a comment in the comment section and always remember, stay vigilant, stay safe. Peace.